Welcome back, guys, to another North to South show. I am so glad that you are here. Today is Monday, June the 28th, and today I'm not the only one on here today. I actually have a special guest for kind of a Gamecocks Concentrated episode of the North to South show where we have our friend Chris from the Spurs Up Show, so I'll bring him up on the screen now. Chris, how is it going? And are you excited to talk some Gamecock football today?
Yes, sir. Noah, what's up, man? I was sitting there jamming to that little pre-show thing you got going, dude. I'm fired up now. I feel like we're like right in the middle. I feel like I'm playing NCAA 14 right now with the fight songs and everything. But no, seriously, no, I appreciate you having me on, man. Obviously, been watching from afar. Obviously, I think people are fairly familiar with the work that we do together, but I've been watching the North to South show grow from afar and all the content you make and all the great work you do. So I appreciate you having me on, man. And like I said, this time of year, of course, like we were talking about off air, you know, it's great to just talk football. We're 68 days away from kickoff, and it'll be here before you know it. But seriously, man, thanks so much for having me on. Excited to chat with you.
Hey, no problem at all. So for those of you who don't know, which many of you know, especially if you're a Gamecocks fan, one of the, if not the best content creators in Gamecocks, and not just Gamecocks, like you look at SEC, you look at college football. So seriously, I put it in the title at the Spurs Up Show. If you aren't already subscribed to him, following him on Instagram, following him on Twitter, and listen to his podcast, go do so, because I guarantee you he is one of the best entertainers on YouTube. If you haven't found out about the Spurs Up Show, you need to. So I'm super excited to have you on here today. We got our Gamecocks merch on. Obviously, you're wearing the Spurs Up Show merch. Clem sucks. Beamer ball hat.
Clem sucks. If you hate Clemson, it's great content to follow as well. And yeah, I made the joke over the weekend. I might never take this hat off ever again with the job Shane Beamer's doing the recruiting trail, 9 commits in 9 days, and the momentum he's built. So if you haven't noticed that, if you're tuned in, you're not a fan of the Gamecocks, it's pretty wild right now in Gamecock country. But yeah, man, we do it all: podcasts, articles, video, merch, social media, daily live stream like you do also as well. You know, YouTube, of course, heck, we're even on TikTok. So a little bit of everything, and really excited about some new stuff we're rolling out here soon as well. But no, again, appreciate the kind words, man. Yeah, like I said, I might never take this Beamer ball hat off, man. What Shane's doing, the Shane train is full steam ahead right now. So it's pretty fun.
We could spend the whole episode or a whole live stream for like 3 hours just talking about Shane Beamer. That might have to wait. But if you do want the Gamecocks merch, Clem Sucks hat, Beamer ball hat, tsus.store. I know we got to plug the merch. Merch is always popping. Merch is always popping. But I'm excited here. Like, I am super excited. We're going to get into talking about some Gamecock football like we always do. We are both big Gamecocks fans. Now, if you know me, I'm from Canada. I've only been a Gamecock fan for what it has only been like 2012. 2012 has been when I really found out about the Gamecocks and decided to become a fan. Chris, you are from South Carolina, right?
Right. North Augusta, South Carolina, born and raised, and been a diehard Gamecock fan since I was probably 11 or 12 or so, and I could really process it and understand just how big it was and how much it meant. It was my grandfather was the one that actually got me into it. But I mean, the moment I really could understand it, could click, okay, this is like really important. This is really something we're passionate about. I mean, it's been in my blood ever since, man. So I've been a Gamecock fan long as I can remember, as long as I've been watching college football, and still to this day. So ride or die for sure.
Yeah, not even that you're just a fan. Like, this is your job. Like, your job is
full
to talk
time.
about Gamecock, and you're like organically grown. You grew your own brand and everything, so it's incredible. So I'm really excited. We could talk for days just about our stories and talk about how much we love the Gamecocks, but we got actually some segments planned today for you guys to listen to, and maybe if we have some time at the end, we will get into a Q&A if you guys have any questions about the Gamecocks, because I'm telling you, Chris from the Spurs Up Show, this is something I love to do on my lunch. What is it? Every day from 12 to 1, correct? I join
the Daily Crow. Yeah, we're 12 to 1 right now, Monday through Friday, the Daily Crow. And right now, of course, it's a little it's a little hit or miss just because it's the preseason, it's the summer, everything else. But normally, most weeks, Monday through Friday, noon to 1, actually going to be expanding the show, Noah, probably starting early to mid-August. Going to be going 12 to 2. So it's actually going to expand from an hour long to 2 hours because, of course, once we get into the season and we get into game week, there's going to be so much to talk about. We take calls, we take questions, comments, everything else. So there's going to be a lot of people obviously wanting to call in and ask questions and all that good stuff. So I thought, why not? I think it's a great idea to expand that. But yeah, right now, noon to 1, Monday through Friday, the Daily Crow, just taking questions, comments, calls about the Gamecocks, really sports, anything else, but obviously mainly, of course, it's South Carolina. But we have a great time, man. You're doing the exact same thing you're doing with the YouTube stuff, and we're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We stream that live too. So no, it's a good time. It gets pretty rowdy too when you're doing it like in post game, and it can get very interesting. Put it that way.
Baseball season, especially.
So,
baseball season. Lots of people I tune in every day at lunch since like my school was online this year and everything, and my lunch was from like 11:15 to like 1 exactly. So it was like that was kind of my timer. I tune into the Daily Crow, and as soon as that finished, I knew when to log on to my class. But basically, my whole point of bringing this up is best content, best Gamecocks content. Enough about that. We were finally going to get into a Gamecocks segment. A Gamecock segment for us today. Our first one we got up today is we are going to talk about Luke Doty, more the national narrative around Luke Doty. Now, we're kind of in that magazine age. What do you want to call it?
Preseason magazine season.
Yeah,
it's as Coach Spurrier used to say, it is talking season. It is talking season right now, 110% for sure.
Yeah. So all the magazines, everything is coming out. It's about to be media days. We got all this fun stuff leading up until kickoff, which for us is September 4th. Some teams will be starting in August. We will have college football in August, which will be exciting. So we're basically only a month away, or 2 months away from college football. But my main point of this is you start to see how other people, outsiders, as you want to call them, think about your football program. And for the Gamecocks right now, going through a coaching change and everything like that not only that has affected the narrative of the Gamecocks, but really just looking at the quarterback rankings. And obviously we know quarterbacks are the quarterback and the leader of your offense, kind of the leader of your team. You really base so many different teams, and it's not just in college level, it's in NFL level, it's in high school. You base so many teams off of their quarterback. And right now, so many of these experts have Luke Doty number 14, number 13 in the SEC. And that's against guys like Ken Seals. That's against the Kentucky guys who we don't even know is going to be the quarterback yet. There's so many guys that maybe we feel as Gamecocks should be lower than Luke Doty is, but yet Luke Doty is sitting at that 14 spot. So what I want to ask you, Chris, is where is this kind of narrative coming from? Where is Luke Doty standing in our minds? And where do you think he will end up as the season finishes out?
Well, yeah, I think it's something Gamecock fans shouldn't take personally, because you look at it, Luke Doty's just one big question mark, man, as is this South Carolina football team. I think that's where the national narrative comes from, man. I don't think it's that, Luke Doty, when he was recruited, he was a 4-star prospect. He was a really good player, but right now, you're coming into a brand new era. I mean, people don't even know what the offense is going to look like under Marcus Satterfield and Shane Beamer, and realistically, what can they do? We know they have Kevin Harris and Marshawn Lloyd and a stacked backfield, Rashad Amos, Aquandre White, guys aren't even talking about. But when it comes to Luke Doty, like you mentioned, man, quarterback's the most important position on the field. There's no question. If you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance. And I think where that national narrative does come in, I'll put it to you this way, Noah, and this might kind of throw you for a loop a little bit, but I was talking to a buddy about this. Believe it or not, for those who aren't around Gamecock football, there are some that do not look at Gamecock football favorably right now. And here's the thing. How do we look at Tennessee? How do we view Tennessee right now? They're a dumpster fire, right? They're all over the place. They're probably not going to be very good this year. They're dysfunctional. There are people that are looking at South Carolina exactly the same. Now, whether you think they're right, they're wrong, or indifferent, I think, again, for Gamecock fans, don't take it personally. Luke Doty's a guy who only played in 3 games last year, was a true freshman, very mixed bag when he did play. How you can hold that against him, though, how can you? It took over in the worst possible situation with Will Muschamp getting fired, Mike Bobo taking over. You look at who he played, having to play on the road. Hey, playing with a decimated roster. I think they took 45 guys to Kentucky. So the real reason is this. I think when these guys, I've had a couple of my show, SEC Mike, who does that SEC podcast, and I've talked with the Saturday Down South guys, and all these guys who do a fantastic job, when they're ranking 1 through 14 and they're ranking the 14 best signal callers in the SEC, you kind of got to go with your knowns versus your unknowns. And right now for Luke Doty and South Carolina, there are just so many unknowns surrounding this football team, that position, who's going to catch the football, which I know we're going to get into more in just a little bit. So I think when it comes to Luke Doty and that analysis, I don't think, if you ask these guys, hey, why did you rank him 14th? Do you just think he's terrible? I don't really think they'd have a good answer to back it up for you. It's just simply that he hasn't proven anything to you yet. It's kind of, nobody really knows what to expect, I think. Now, as far as Gamecock circles, if you got to watch him in the spring game and you saw him a little bit last year, you saw some flashes of what he could do. And you remember when South kind of was recruiting him on the recruiting trail, this is a kid with a lot of upside. Obviously, athleticism. I've talked many times, Noah, I'm sure you've heard me say, I think the worst narrative surrounding Luke Doty is his criticisms of his throwing ability and people saying he can't throw the football downfield. He doesn't have a good arm. And maybe he's not the most elite passer on the roster. There's many fans that will argue that Jason Brown should get more of a look. Of course, let's not forget Shane Beamer did name Luke Doty QB1 after the spring, which I was honestly a little bit surprised about. Now that we've gotten to summer, though, I think I do understand that decision in the sense of I don't think Shane Beamer wanted the quarterback conversation or any type of quarterback controversy to linger along through this summer where people like you and I could sort of spin the narrative and control the narrative. He said, no, we're going to name this guy our starter. He's the leader of our football team. He is QB1 as of now. So when you look at Luke Doty as a Gamecock fans, I'm really excited about Luke Doty. I think, again, he fits this offense, what it needs right now, because a lot of people ask Marcus Satterfield, Shane Beamer, what's the offense going to look like? What type of system do they want to run? And I think certainly, Shane Beamer wants to do things that he did under Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. I think that Marcus Satterfield wants to do things that he did with Joe Brady in Charlotte and kind of take some of what those guys did. But what encourages me most is I think it's going to be an offense. These are going to be guys that make a scheme for the talent they have on the roster. You can't fit a square peg into a round hole, right? So they're going to take the guys they got. Hey, look at South Carolina. What's your strengths? What's your weaknesses? They can run the football. Look at the running backs they have. They have weaknesses on the outside at wide receiver. Which quarterback on the roster best fits that? Well, the athletic guy, Luke Doty, who can keep a defense honest, keep them on their heels, and make them guess, and really make it tough on opposing defenses, especially with as athletic as they are in the SEC. So again, I feel good about Luke Doty, and Noah, the only reason I think that the national narrative is low on him necessarily is it's just because it's one big question mark, just like the rest of South Carolina football right now as we go into Shane Beamer's first season.
Yeah, 100%. Like this kid's talent, like when we brought him into South Carolina, like what you said, he was the fourth best quarterback in his class overall. Like the kid's got talent. You throw him in at a really, really bad time. Like what is he? Comes in for the second half of the Missouri game, then he goes and plays Georgia, then he goes and plays Kentucky. When the whole program is just in a big dumpster fire at the time. Now it's gotten a lot better. Obviously, we are huge Shane Beamer guys. Everything that he's been doing since there has been amazing. What I really want to see from Luke Doty this season is just consistency throwing it. I think that it is huge for us that he is athletic and he has the ability to be able to run and make first downs out of absolutely nothing. I think that's huge for any college football quarterback, because you look at Gamecock football, when we were most successful, Connor Shaw, I'm telling you, like this was when I was way back really young, but I still remember Connor Shaw being athletic enough to make some serious plays on his feet. I think Luke Doty still has that athleticism and maybe even more than what Connor Shaw had. So very excited to see what he can do with his feet. Just, we don't need this guy to be that 5,000-yard passer for the Gamecocks to be successful. I don't think that we need to see this guy be your Joe Burrow, your Mac Jones, because Joe Burrow, yes, he made some plays with his feet sometimes, but for the most part, Mac Jones was just a statue back there, and he could throw the ball.
Right. I would say this, Noah. I mean, I think South Carolina, I'll put it out there right now, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think the Gamecocks, I'll say right now, in games where South Carolina throws the football 30 or more times this season, I think they'll lose every one of them. This is not going to be a team that is going to throw the football a ton. I think it needs to be an offense that commits to the run. Hey, 4 or 5 offensive line starters returning also for a line that paved the way for a 1,000-yard rusher in Kevin Harris against an all-SEC schedule in 10 games a year ago. So there's no secret what the strength is of South Carolina football. Again, do you have to be able to throw it every now and then to keep a defense honest? Absolutely. But that's all you have to do. Like you're mentioning, you're not asking Luke Doty to be a hero for this South Carolina offense this year through the air. And like I said, right now, yes, there are some guys on the Gamecocks roster, which we're going to get into more in just a second, that fans feel good about, fans are high on. They feel like Justin Stepp, can he flip the wide receiver room and make this position unit a surprise for the Carolina football team in 2021? Maybe he can, but right now, that's a position of weakness. So you don't need Luke Doty. Hey, putting the guy in that is the superior passer, that's the elite thrower of the football, that's going to do you no good in this offense. I think you need to be 70-30 run to pass, pick and choose your spots. If you get a matchup you like, if you get somebody one-on-one, hey, you get EJ Jenkins, 6'7.5", one-on-one on the outside, you want to go to him, fine, by all means do so. But the Gamecocks are going to need to commit to running the football, use the read option, use Luke Doty's athleticism. Hey, guess what? When you don't have those options, those weapons on the outside, guess what else that means? When you do throw it, there are going to be a lot of plays where Luke Doty steps back there, and guess what, Noah? Nobody's going to be open at first. And guess what he'll have to do? Improvise. He'll have to scramble. He'll have to move around in the pocket. I think one of the reasons, and the offensive line is taking the brunt of the criticism and the blame for this for last year, but the sack numbers were astronomical, right? You remember watching Gamecock games. I mean, we just, for the life of us, it was just sack after sack after sack. And when you have a guy that looks like he's in concrete shoes back there and he can't move, you just simply don't have a chance, man. Like I said, with as athletic and as good as these defensive lines are, you've got to have a guy that can get outside the pocket. Heck, even Jake Bentley could wiggle a little bit. I mean, I gave him all kinds of hell when was the Gamecocks starting quarterback. So listen, overall, Luke Doty, his athleticism, the way he fits this offense, I think that makes him the perfect fit for what South Carolina is going to try to do this year. Again, man, like I said, I think in games where they throw it 30 times or more, I think the Gamecocks lose every single one of them. They're going to have to run the football, commit to the run, even if it's not working early. You're just simply too good behind him with Kevin Harris, Marshawn Lloyd. That might end up being the best 1-2 punch in the SEC, if not the entire country. So I think Luke Doty can give you enough. And again, his athleticism is the X factor. I don't want to compare him to Connor Shaw or make any crazy comparisons like that, but if you can be creative and use his legs and let his athleticism work, and then you have those running backs, then you get just enough out of your wide receivers. And, of course, don't forget your tight ends, guys like Jaheim Bell and Nick Muse and EJ Jenkins, whichever position he plays with its wide receiver tight end. I think you have enough outside at the wide receiver position to where you can get enough to have some balance, but there's no secret the Gamecocks are going to revolve around running the football. And I think Luke Doty will be a big part of that running game as well.
Yeah, I think my key, if Luke Doty, if we could hit 1 to 2 or maybe even 3, like 30-plus yard plays each and every game, or especially in those big games, like you look at the games, which we're going to get to in a bit, your games against like Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, those kind of toss-up games that we need to make it to a bowl game, I think this will be a bowl team because, like you're talking about, this running back corps or this running back room is one of the best in all of the SEC. Like, it's no secret how good this running back room is, and you can rely on that. You said it again, 4 or 5 starters return on the offensive line. This rushing game will be the strength of this team, but we still got to get down the field. I'm not saying that we got to be some Ole Miss. We got to be some Alabama throwing the ball 50 yards every single play, but if we can do that, and I think the rushing game will really, really help because you're going to have guys expecting Kevin Harris, Marshawn Lloyd, Rashad Amos, Saquandre White. You're going to have guys expecting Luke Doty to run the football. If you just get those 1 or 2 plays where you just get the defense in the right spot and you're able to make a big play, that's going to be the difference between maybe 3 or no points in a drive or 7 and no points in a drive.
You without a doubt,
Gamecocks,
I was going to say
huge.
You without a doubt have to at least have the threat of stretching the field. And again, like I said, I feel like I keep alluding to the next topic we're going to get to, but the wide receiver position, I think you have enough, again, athleticism out there to where you're going to have those threats. As long as you can keep those safeties honest and don't let them creep up and start to take away in that running game, that's all you need. But again, like you're saying, South Carolina's not going to be a team that throws it 40, 50 times a game, whatever. But I will say this back to the narrative about Luke Doty, and especially from his own fan base, that because, if you talk to Gamecock fans about Luke Doty, the number one criticism fans have is, he can't throw the football. He's not a great thrower of the ball. Look what he did in the last 3 games. Look at it. I would challenge you, just go watch the spring game. Just go back and watch the spring game because I was there in person. There was nothing I saw from Luke Doty that tells me he cannot throw the football. I don't know where I don't understand it. It's the worst narrative surrounding South Carolina football and the Gamecocks QB1 right now. I don't get it. He can throw the ball. Again, am I saying he's the most elite downfield passer in the world? Is he, like you said, is he Joe Burrow? Is he Mac Jones? Is he going to be? Maybe not, but I mean, to just act like the guy can't throw the ball at all, like he's Tim Tebow out there, like that. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So listen, I think he can throw the ball. I have no concerns with that. Had Perry Orth on the show a couple of weeks ago, who played quarterback for the Gamecocks. He talked about his arm's only going to get stronger, man. He's only 19 years old. So I think Luke Doty, hey, if there's something he can improve on, man, I know you want to talk about that. If there's something that he can improve on, certainly throwing the football and being a more consistent passer, is the number one thing for him. But for Luke Doty passing the football, the thing I want to more so see is just efficiency. Just take care of it, right? You don't have to be the hero. We don't have to hit 50-yard bombs every play, certainly enough to keep the defense honest. But just be efficient with the football. You've got really, really good backs behind you. You've got a good offensive line. You're an athlete yourself. Just don't do anything to lose the game for South Carolina. At least that's what I'll be looking for early on. Once he shows that he's efficient with it, he's taking care of the ball. Maybe you want to start taking some more chances going downfield. Hey, especially if somebody steps up on the outside of the wide receiver position, all of a sudden you might be able to take more shots. But I think going into the season, that's what I want to see, a 70-30 running attack, and Luke Doty just be a guy back there for you who the staff uses his athleticism, uses his attributes, gets the most out of him, and Luke Doty be a guy that just takes care of the football for South Carolina. He does that, and I think the Gamecocks offense will have a lot of success this year.
Yeah, like going back, the national narrative will be a lot better next season for Luke Doty if he manages games correct. Like, winning is success for the quarterback. It's not only like success for everyone, but if your team is winning and you're the quarterback of that team, no matter if you go up and put up like 600 yards in a game, or maybe you only put up like 150 passing in that game, if you manage the game right and if you do all those little things correct, your narrative is going to go up. Like, you will see Luke Doty in the top half if the Gamecocks do go out and have an amazing season. I'm not expecting him to be the 14th guy next year, but I think we are going to start seeing him shooting up these boards.
And I think just more reps. I think just more reps and playing games this season. Actually, like, again, people just, the national guys, they have no idea what to expect. Brand new coaching staff, brand new offense. He barely played a season ago. So he might as well just be a true freshman all over again. I think that's how the national guys look at it. So I would just say to fans, I wouldn't worry about it too much, man. But yeah, absolutely. Listen, I don't think he'll be ranked 14th next year. I think Luke Doty is primed for a good season. But yeah, he needs to evolve, and he needs to be that game breaker for the Gamecocks in certain scenarios at quarterback. Because, hey, like we said in the beginning, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance. And that will certainly be the case yet again for South Carolina, who is a team that, by the way, has really struggled to find that guy since the Connor Shaw and Dylan Thompson days. I mean, it has been just a real time under center. I mean, you think about all the guys who have come and gone and the careers of each and every single one of them. The Gamecocks under Shane Beamer, that has to be priority number one, finding that game changer at quarterback. Is it Doty? Is it Braden Davis in recruiting? Is it somebody else? Is it Jason Brown? Heck, I don't know. But you've got to find that guy. Because, again, if you don't have a quarterback, and South kind of seen it the last couple of years, especially last year, all due respect to Colin Hill. I got no issue with Colin Hill. But when you don't have a quarterback that's a game breaker that can even put fear into a defense, you got nothing, man. It's just going to be a really long season. So hopefully Luke Doty can be that guy for South Carolina.
Yeah, not only be that guy for South Carolina and Luke Doty, but I think the future of the Gamecocks quarterback room, if Luke Doty can be that guy for the next couple of years and really work around and build an offense that this coaching staff feels really consistent around and feel really confident in, I think Braden Davis could step into that spot easily when it's his time. So I think lots of good could come from Luke Doty, and we'll kind of wrap that segment up there just talking about Luke Doty. Let's get to who he is going to be passing to next year, because the Gamecocks wide receiver room, at least from when I became a fan, and like you look back, you could probably touch on this a bit more, go back to the 2000s, late 2000s, like you look at your 2008, 2009, 2010, then you go to your early 2010s and everything like that. The wide receiver position was huge for the Gamecocks. Like, we've always had talented guys back there. Am I wrong about that?
No, I mean, it's crazy, the history of South Carolina football, which it's not the most favorable. But the Gamecocks have had great players. I mean, there's no question. You look over the history, I mean, it goes all the way back to Sterling Sharp in the 80s. And then, when I first became a fan, man, Troy Williamson was crushing on the outside. And then Sidney Rice was like the all-timer. I think Sidney's a guy, man, we did we're in list season right now, right? We're in Mount Rushmore season, as some may say, preseason magazine season, talking season, whatever. And I've been doing my top 5 lists of all time for the Gamecocks for basically every single position. And I talked about Sidney Rice, the guy for me. Certainly he's in the top 5. I think if he'd have played another year, he's easily the best to ever do it in garnet and black. But yeah, man, from Sterling to Robert Brooks to Troy Williamson to Sidney to Alshon to Kenny McKinley to Ace Sanders to Debo to Edwards to Smith. You just go down the list of names, man. South Carolina has for some reason has put out some really, really good wide receivers. And that's what makes, I know you're getting to this, that's what makes this year so weird. I think maybe 2016 was the other time, but there have not been many seasons as Gamecock fans coming into a season saying, who's the number one receiver? Hey, your leading returning receiver caught 11 passes last year. So definitely one of the biggest question marks on a team that's filled with question marks going into this season.
Yeah, like I go back to when I first became a fan. Like when I first became a fan, you had Sanders, you had Bruce Ellington, you had Demir Bird, you had all those guys. And then when those guys left, you have Pharaoh Cooper step in, who he breaks out and has a huge
I didn't even mention
Cooper.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he was one of my favorite guys back then. And then when Pharaoh leaves in 2015, well, guess who steps onto the board? You got Deebo Samuel. And then after that, the cream of the crop comes when you have Deebo, you have Brian Edwards, you have Shi Smith, and there's another guy that I want to name, but I'm going to save it because I'm going to talk about him a bit later. And then you just get to this season. After Shi leaves, after Deebo leaves, after Brian leaves, I've never been in this position for Gamecock football where it's just like 3rd and 7, you're in a big game, a fourth quarter, 5 minutes left or something like that against Kentucky. You're on like the 45. You need a first down here. You're down 7 or something like that. Who is this ball going to? I've never been in this position because it's always like, oh, you're going to Deebo easily. You're going to Brian Edwards. You're going to Pharaoh. Like, there's no question about that. And it didn't really hit me. This might be the most Gen Z thing you've ever heard in talking about sports. It's like, it didn't really hit me until I downloaded the SG1 Sports roster on NCAA and I started playing as the Gamecocks. And I get in that position and I'm like, where the heck is Shi? Where are all these guys that are like, who's my go-to guy here? I know it sounds so insane, but like, that's honestly what it hit me. Now, I do think that we have talent on this wide receiver room, and that's what we're going to talk about. Who is going to be that go-to guy for the Gamecocks this season? That's what we're going to talk about. So I'm just going to ask you before I get into my guy, who do you think will be that guy? Again, that situation that I said, let's say that early September or that late September game against Kentucky, 3rd and 7, blah, 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 that scenario. Who is going to be that guy for the Gamecocks that you know, okay, this ball is going to him, he's going to catch the ball, and the Gamecocks are going to keep this drive moving?
Well, since you've downloaded the SG1 Sports rosters, I feel like you already know the answer to this question. But even without that, I think it's going to be Amarian Brown, the transfer from Georgia Tech. And he's a guy that nobody's talking about. You know, obviously sat out the spring game, I think was nursing a little bit of an injury, if you will. But I think Amarian Brown, man, if you haven't watched his film, you haven't watched his tape from Georgia Tech, I highly suggest you do so. This kid was an absolute freak, a speed demon. I think he's going to be the guy for the Gamecocks that can take the top off of that defense, and he has those Deebo Samuel, Shi Smith-esque qualities, you know, extremely quick, can play in the slot. But, you know, I think the scenario that you're talking about, Noah, who's going to be the 3rd and 7, who's going to be the clutch guy, that's almost a different, you know, that's something we're not going to know until we play games. Who do I think is going to be wide receiver 1? I think it's going to be Amarian Brown. Who's going to be the guy that I think can stretch the field for the Gamecocks? I think it's going to be Amarian Brown. Again, the convenience for South Carolina, what's so great, this isn't a guy that's a true freshman that, we just know he's fast and we're projecting and hoping he'll have a great year. This is a guy who's already done it at the Power 5 level. So you feel really good about, you know, and that's why you take guys in the transfer portal, right? It's much less of a risk and much less of a something you worry about when you know a guy, hey, he's already done it at the Power 5 level at a big-time school like a Georgia Tech. He's done it up against teams like Clemson, like like all the other ACC schools out there. So I think Amarian Brown will be wide receiver 1. But 3rd and 7 against Kentucky in the fourth quarter in a tie ball game, who is the go-to guy? Because, again, I think there's a difference. Is it Amarian Brown? Is it E.J. Jenkins? God forbid, is it DeCarrion Joyner? Does somebody like Trey Smith or Josh Vann or Rico Powers or Jakari Caldwell step up? I said this after the spring game, Noah, and I'll say it yet again. When you talk about the wide receivers, currently where the Gamecocks are now, we have a room full of a bunch of guys. There's a ton of guys in that room. There's no question. There are a ton of bodies. You got to find some dudes. You've got to find some dudes between now and kickoff, some dudes who are going to go out there and make plays for you. Make those big-time plays. Be a go-to guy. Hey, it's one-on-one. Win your matchup and get open and make that big catch for you. Again, I don't know that we're really going to find that answer before we get to kickoff. And the wide receiver position is so interesting because – you know, it's one of those positions we talk about. We're going to find out, was it for a lot of guys on this roster, we're going to find out, was it just coaching holding them back? Was it just coaching? Or are maybe some of these guys not quite as good as we thought they were in the recruiting process? And I hate to call them out by name, but Trey Smith and Josh Vann, they are the perfect example of that. Two dudes who came in, 4-star guys. You know, we all had high hopes. Trey Smith obviously had an incredible freshman year. He's battled some injuries, of course, but they've just sort of fallen off the map for you. You know, has it been development issues? Was it really just the previous coaching staff? Can Justin Stepp get more out of them? So again, you've got a room full of guys right now, but you got to find some legit dudes. You got to get some legit dudes to where it's like you don't have a bunch of guys looking around saying, okay, who's going to make the play? You've got a bunch of dudes fighting for the football saying, I'm going to make the play. I'm going to be the one. Throw it to me. I want the ball. So I think right now, going into the fall, if I'm projecting the depth chart and everything else, and like I said, it's kind of funny you bring up the SG1 Sports, the rosters and everything else, because, of course, they've got a Marion Brown rated like a 95 speed on there, and they have as an impact player. So not to steal your thunder if that's the direction you were going, but, you know, just even before that, when I watched his tape at Georgia Tech and what he did, and you kind of saw the game-breaking ability he had as a true freshman, I think Marion Brown certainly is the guy that nobody's talking about that I think is going to be that big impact guy for you at wide receiver. But who are going to be those clutch, dependable players that we can look to, like you said, in those big moments when you need to throw the football, that are going to get separation, they're going to catch the football. And again, how much of it was a lack of development and a lack of coaching in that position? Can Justin Stepp flip that room for you? You have a lot of options. You don't have a lack of options. But again, we've got to see some guys transform from being just guys on the roster who out there have a scholarship and, oh, I get to run out of 2001. No, we need you to be a playmaker. We need you to be an impact guy. Again, that's why Justin Stepp was hired. That's why Shane Beamer was hired. We'll see if they can find just 3 or 4 even dependable guys to help out Luke Doty this fall. But if I had to pick one, long story short, I think Amarian Brown is going to be wide receiver 1, but I think EJ Jenkins is that X factor. I think he's kind of the guy that I think he could be that, hey, 3rd and 7, we need a big-time catch. We're going to you, because he's such a mismatch nightmare at 6'7.5", coming over from St. Francis, but 6'7.5", man. I cannot wait to watch this dude in the red zone, the type of threat he'll be down there. But I do think Amarian Brown, I think he'll be the dude that Sal kind of looks to more often than not this season when they need a big play in the passing game.
Yeah, 100%. You talk about EJ Jenkins, just watching him in the spring game. You just look at him physically and you're like, okay, I want to throw the ball to this guy, because it's almost like just a basketball. Just throw it up to him in the post. He'll come down with it and he'll put it up. Like this guy can catch everything if he has the height advantage and everything, which he does. So
as someone, just to give you some insight, Noah, as just real quick, as someone who has met EJ Jenkins in person, he is a monster. I mean, I mean, he is, you know, I'm 6'2". I'm like, I can't even fathom going up against this guy one-on-one. So, you know, I think he's going to have a field day. I will just leave it at that.
Yeah, of course. The guy that I kind of want to touch on, again, like I kind of wanted to single this to wide receivers, because tight ends, like 3rd and 7, like I could make a reasonable case for Nick Muse kind of being that guy, because he's like an experienced guy. I think he's got the hands. He's been a really solid guy for the Gamecocks throughout his tenure there. But talking about wide receivers, you kind of touched on him before on how he's a guy that's fallen off. But I want to talk about Ortre Smith, because Ortre, when you go back to that preseason 2017 and you ask any real Gamecock fans, what are you excited for? You say you're excited for the wide receiver room, and you do not leave Ortre Smith out of that conversation. There's no chance. You talk about Debo, obviously, then you go to Brian, and then it's the 2 Smith boys. Like, you look at both of their stats from that season. They both had around 30 catches. They both had 3 touchdowns. They both had around like 300 yards, something like that, 400 yards. Ortre was the future of this Gamecocks wide receiver room with Shi Smith, with Brian Edwards for a long time. Now, obviously, injury and everything like that has really taken a toll on him. If he can get back to that form and improve throughout the injuries and everything like that, come back healthy and give us a bit more than what we saw in his freshman season, I see him as a guy who's got the hands to be that guy on the 3rd down that you go to. Yes, he's fallen off a cliff the last couple seasons and everything like that, and we haven't seen that much of him, although there's been tons of guys. You look at guys like Josh Van Tu, look at guys like Xavier Leggett, guys like that, who have just kind of, you see them as the future of your wide receiver room, and you haven't heard their names in a while watching the games and everything like that. But Ortre Smith, I'm really, really excited to see him hopefully back in full force this season. There's no guy that I want to see more perform better on this team than DeCarrion Joyner, and I'd love him to be that 3rd down guy. I also think you look at Brown and then you look at Dak Joyner being those guys that could really stretch the field athleticism wise. I think that those are your 2 guys, but I'm kind of with you in the sense that 3rd down, I really like EJ Jenkins too. Depends on where we play him, wide receiver or tight end. And then I like Ortre Smith. And then there's a couple other guys that I like, which we're going to talk about, kind of the younger guys. This is what I want to ask you now. Who's going to be your breakout guy, not necessarily be wide receiver one, not necessarily be that guy who gets the most yards, gets the most receptions, gets the most touchdowns, everything like that, but the guy who improves the most at the wide receiver position. So we're looking at more of the younger guys here. Who is going to be that guy for you, Chris?
Well, I don't even know if he's really a younger guy, but I just think you're going to see him used a lot more. I mean, I think, listen, there's a lot of younger guys that could be candidates for this, right? I look at Rico Powers, Mike Wyman, and Jakari Caldwell. I think out of those three guys you got in last year's class, I'm like, there's no way all of them are going to be busts. Somebody's going to come into their own. But I think the dude that is going to, because I think there are going to be guys that benefit a lot from the coaching change, that benefit a lot from hearing a new voice, being in a new system. I look at Dakereon Joyner. And again, I know he's not necessarily a younger guy, but if there's a guy that is sort of, you don't know what to expect and isn't a name right now, especially especially nationally throughout the SEC. I think Dakereon Joyner, we're going to see him used a lot more in the offense. A guy that they could put back there, a wildcat. You could put him in a true wide receiver position. You can use him in the screen game. You can use him on the jet sweep. There's so many different ways you can get the football in his hand. And we saw it last year. No, I thought, I know it was mind-boggling to us all. Every time Dak Joyner touched the football, it seemed like, at least to me, that really good things happened. And I didn't understand why they weren't getting him the football more, especially for, an offense that was looking for playmakers. So he might not be a young guy necessarily, but if there's someone that I could see really breaking out and having that big-time breakout season with the Gamecocks, I think Dakereon Joyner is as good as any candidate for Sal kind of this season. I really do think the way they're going to use him in this offense, you saw a little bit of that in the spring game, but the way they're going to use him in this offense, I'm really excited to see it again. I think Marcus Satterfield, Shane Beamer, Justin Stepp are going to have a plan for him, and he is a guy with an undeniable skill set. Like, whether he's playing quarterback, whether he's at wide receiver, I don't give a damn if he's at defensive back. The kid has an undeniable skill set. So listen, I'm not saying Dak Joyner is going to be some 1,000-yard wide receiver and is going to go crazy or what have you, but I think if there's a guy that's going to break out and is really, really going to benefit from being in a new system and hearing a new voice and having a new staff around him, I think Dak Joyner could be that dude. But again, what's so crazy, Noah, about this position, man, just roll the dice, take your pick. I mean, there's tons of guys you could pick. There's tons of candidates, tons of options here. Rico Powers is another one, man. I thought you saw flashes from him last year. Hey, Xavier Legette's still basically technically a young guy. So, the Gamecocks didn't pull in a ton of freshman wide receivers this year. I guess Omega Blake is one who I think could have. Yeah. Omega Blake's the only one. I think he could have an impact, but that's a crowded room, like I said. But like I said, a dude that I think could break out, that I just don't know that he's really been utilized correctly the last couple of years. I think Dak Joyner could be that dude, man. Like I said, every time he touches the ball, it seems good things happen. And, if they use him the right way, if they get creative, he's a guy, Noah, in my opinion, needs to touch it at least 8 to 10 times a game. I know that might sound crazy, but he has an undeniable skill set. He has that athleticism. I'm excited to see it go to work this season.
Yeah, there is, not even talking football, there is no better guy to root for on this team than Dak Joyner. I have no problems coming out and saying that he's probably my favorite player. You just look at any of his interviews, any of that stuff. He's a team player. He's a guy who has stayed on this team because he wants this team to go and do well. He wants to help this team. He could have gone anywhere else. If we're being honest, the dude is talented enough that he could probably go out and get some serious playing time at multiple different schools. But I love the fact that every single time they talk to him in the press conferences and everything, he's like, I just want to do my job to help this team win. And he came in as quarterback, switched to wide receiver. And I kind of agree with you. This guy's athleticism is legit, and he could be that guy. If you just get the ball in his hands with space, he still needs some work with his hands, but I saw huge improvements of that in the spring game looking from last year.
I thought he looked really good in the spring game, really, honestly.
Thought he looked good. The improvements with his hands have been there, and they're growing. If he is that guy, if I want anyone to break out, again, like you said, I want it to be Dak Joyner, not only because he deserves it, because of everything that he's done for this team, and I love his personality and attitude towards the game and everything like that, but he's a guy that if you do get the ball in his hands and everything like that, he can do the most damage. I think you're right. Brown and Dak Joyner are the guys that can do the most damage down the field and stretch the field. I think EJ Jenkins can catch the ball better than either of those guys. But if we're talking about gaining yards and everything like that, I really like Dak Joyner and Emerine Brown. The guy that I'm going to go for breakout, a guy that I want to see breakout, again, like you mentioned him already, Rico Powers is definitely a guy that I'm going to be looking for. You talk about that 2020 recruiting class where you bring in Jordan Birch, you bring in Luke Doty, you bring in Marshawn Lloyd, and obviously those are the guys that you're going to look at and be like, I can't wait to see these guys play. But even for me, at least, I look at that recruiting class and I was through the moon about having Rico Powers and like your Mike Wymans and everything like that, Gurkari Caldwell, all those guys, because I thought that this was the future of our wide receiver room. Now, these guys are only sophomores. They only have had one season in the Gamecocks program. I think you could pick any of those three guys to have a big season. But if I'm going to pick one guy, I'm really, really excited to see what Rico Powers could do. You look at him, 6'2", about 195 pounds. Get him on the outside. I think he could be something really, really special for the Gamecocks offense this season if you're able to get the ball in his hands and just let him go out and play. Let these young guys go out and play. And again, kind of what you're saying is we need some dudes who want to be that guy who's like, I want this ball. I want this ball to throw to me. Yeah. Not necessarily being the diva of the team or being like, I'm the best guy or anything like that, but you need guys to be like, I am not afraid to take on any situation. Not even I'm not afraid. I want to take on the situation that we have a 4th and 7 and the whole state's back is on, or the whole state is on my back for me catching this ball and everything like that. We need guys like that in this locker room. And I think that we're going to get that this season. I think
it's like Perry Orr. Yeah, it's like Perry Orr told me he came on the show and we were just talking about, the biggest differences between, because Perry sort of saw it all, right? He got there in 2013, was there till 2016. Went through a coaching change, went through everything, I feel like, in Columbia. But he talked about the biggest differences between the 2015 team and the 2013 team. Again, back to what I said before. On the 15 team, they had a bunch of guys looking around saying, okay, who's going to make the big play? The 13 team, you had a bunch of guys fighting for the football. So it's kind of like going back to the question you said, 3rd and 7, who do you throw it to? I think that's something that has to be answered through, he talked about through summer practice, developing that confidence, through fall camp. We have guys with talent. There's no question. You don't end up at an SEC school. You don't end up at a school like South Carolina if you're not a talented football player. But now it's about evolving and taking that next step, going from a guy, again, who just fills out a jersey and has a scholarship to a guy who is an impact player. And when the moment, the situation calls for it, everybody steps up and makes that play. So I think definitely, man, Rico Powers, another big body wide receiver. Again, Wyman, and Gurkari Caldwell. I mean, you got to think at least one of those three guys is going to step up and be an impact guy for you. But again, when it comes to the wide receiver room, it's not for a lack of options that the Gamecocks have question marks. It's just simply a lack of production from that entire room. And again, Justin Stepp, that's why he was hired. He might be the most important assistant coach on this South Carolina coaching staff, just because that's such a position of questions. That's such a position where the Gamecocks need to flip that room and get back to being that traditional power, if you will, when it comes to producing big-time wide receivers.
Yeah, even like you talk about SEC schools have to have good guys. Like even Vanderbilt, you look a couple seasons ago, Kalijah Lipscomb was one of the better wide receivers in all the SEC. So no matter where you go, if you are a wide receiver in the SEC, you're going to be good. So we'll wrap that segment up there. We could talk wide receivers all day because this is a huge topic for the Gamecocks this season. Let's finish up. I'll bring it up on the screen. Let's finish up with talking about and breaking down our rankings for, how do you want to call this? Easiest to hardest games this season for the Gamecocks. So just taking a quick look forward on what our schedule is going to be, our 2021 schedule, our opponents and everything like that, and ranking them from who we think 12th is going to be the easiest and then first is going to be the toughest. So just looking at this straight off the bat, I think we could both agree on Eastern Illinois being the easiest game. There's nothing about that. Yeah, like FCS team. Shane Beamer's first game. Like, it's going to be my first game as a student there, which I am so pumped about, but it's going to be a fun game. It's just going to be a fun game. Yeah. Everyone's going to be celebrating Shane Beamer.
You couldn't ask for a better opening game for a brand new head coach than that one. We'll just leave it at that. With all due respect to the Panthers. Should be a fun night at Willie B.
The only thing I don't like about that game is I know it's a night game at Willie B, opening up for Shane Beamer's first season and everything like that, but they had to schedule, of course, the Georgia and Clemson game. It was expected to be a night game, and that's a game that I will really want to watch, but I'll stream it on my phone at Willie B. I don't care. That's going to be a good game. Okay, so let's go on to number 11 and 10, kind of interchange. There's nothing really too much to argue about here that we have. You have Vanderbilt at 11, Troy at 10. I have Troy at 11 and Vanderbilt at 10. I think that those should both be winnable games. We should be pretty easily favored in both of them. Nothing too much to complain about for those two teams. But I did watch your preview on Troy talking about this might be a team to test you early. Not necessarily they're going to come out and beat the Gamecocks or whatever, but Troy could be a team to test the Gamecocks early. So just speak on Troy for a second.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Troy is a program, really proud program. They're doing a really good job there, and I know they lost one of their biggest playmakers at wide receiver to transfer, but I mean, they've got talent. There's no question, man. And listen, certainly, you look at the schedule when you're breaking down. We'll do this in a couple of weeks: wins, toss-ups, and losses. Everyone is going to and should list Troy as a win when they are breaking down the Gamecock schedule. But Noah, I think you'd agree with this. We're not at a point where we should be taking any game for granted right now. I mean, Eastern Illinois, we all feel good. You know, Eastern Illinois being an FCS team, whatever, that's going to be a win. But the last time South Carolina played a Sun Belt team at home, and again, I know things were completely different. I know the era was different, whatever, but you lost to Appalachian State. Troy has played Power 5 teams really, really tough. So again, that's why I ranked them ahead of Vandy. I just think Vandy, you know, you've won 13 straight, I think it is, against them. Yeah. I know at some point Vanderbilt is going to beat South Carolina in football yet again. It's not going to be a streak that goes on forever, but it's not going to get snapped this year at Williams-Brice Stadium. Vandy with a first-year head coach. I mean, they've got even more question marks than South Carolina has. So I think the Gamecocks should be able to cruise to victory in that one. But that Troy game, again, it's a game we all expect South Carolina to win. They should win, but Troy, hey, they beat LSU a couple of years ago. They've played Power 5 teams really, really tough. And again, a quality football team, you know, because of COVID, guys were able to come back. Troy is one of those teams that really benefited. I think it was a 20 of 22 starters, if I remember correctly, are back for Troy. So, hey, this is a really, really good football program. They've done a really good job down there in Troy. And, a game South Carolina should win, but we're not at the point, like I said, Noah, where we should be sleeping on anyone or taking anyone lightly, especially after what happened the last time you played a Sun Belt team at home. So certainly a game you should win, but that is the reason I ranked it ahead of Vandy.
Yeah, and you look at like Sun Belt teams in general, like you look at SEC teams, you know Vanderbilt. You pretty much know a lot about Vanderbilt and what they're going to be this season. Sun Belt teams, like last season, who had Coastal Carolina doing as good as they did? Who had Louisiana Lafayette doing as good as they did and everything like that? So you really don't know which Sun Belt team is going to break out in which year. And sadly, if we get them early, which we do, what do we have them, October 2nd, something like that at Willie B? Yeah. This could be a team to shock you. So again, like what you've said, do not sleepwalk into any game. I think we all think that we could easily win Eastern Illinois, but the rest of them, I think we still got to come out. And I think Shane Beamer, part of the reason for like having a good attitude for the rest of the games, like you're not going to just flip a switch one day and want to go out and compete against Clemson if you come out with the same, or if you come out with a completely different attitude than you did in a game against Troy. That's what Nick Saban does so well, and I think that's why he's so successful. He has his guys go through the same routine, the same repetition, and come in with the same attitude, whether they're playing the Citadel, which a couple of years ago they were tied at halftime or something like that, or whether they're playing Clemson in the national championship. So Shane Beamer.
Well, I know it. Yeah, I was just going to say, you mentioned where it falls in the schedule, too. I think it's a really interesting spot. You know, it's week 5 after that Kentucky game. Let's say South Carolina does beat Kentucky and they take care of business early in the season. You know, you're flying high under Shane Beamer. You're 3-1. You've got the Tennessee Volunteers the week after Troy, which, of course, is one you always have circled as a Gamecock fan. It kind of falls in a weird spot on the schedule in regards to how it's sandwiched between the Kentucky game at home and the Tennessee game on the road. Again, I feel good. South Carolina should win. I hope I look like an idiot when we have 50 points or whatever it may be, but just don't sleepwalk through that game. I think that's a game. If you do so, you are making a mistake because Troy has shown in the past, you know, like you mentioned, they can sneak up and bite you, and they're a really proud program. And they pride, you know, they're looking at that South Carolina game, probably expecting to win. I mean, that's just the way Troy approaches these games. So, hey, one you should certainly win. One, I don't want to spoil my predictions, but one I'm going to pick the Gamecocks to win. But just don't think you can show up and roll your helmets out there and think you'll come away with a victory. But I think that's the culture. That's the thing that Shane Beamer is changing. He won't allow this team to think it's earned anything, or no matter what the record. Hell, South Carolina could be 4-0 in that point. But I don't think Shane Beamer is going to allow this team to not approach that game the right way and play their best football and all that. But so it does fall at an interesting point in the schedule for sure.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to 9-8 now, which we have the same teams interchangeable, both at 9-8. At ECU, going to Greenville, which I don't think the Gamecocks have done in some time now. It's been a while.
1993, 93, I believe, was the last road
well
trip, or
before I was
97,
born.
something
So
like that. Yeah.
we've played when we last played ECU. Was that 2015? We played ECU 2016. It was somewhere around.
I think it was 2016 at home because it was Muschamp's first season. The Gamecocks won that game. I believe it was 2016 and got outgained by like 250 yards. ECU's wide receiver set like a receptions record with like 19 or 20, I think 22 catches or something like that. And the Gamecocks won because of a pair of Jamarcus King interceptions. Really is the biggest reason. I think South Carolina stopped them like 4 or 5 times in the red zone and escaped that one. But no, it's been some really, really interesting games against ECU where ECU fans, I think, probably feel like they should have gotten the Gamecocks, and they may be right, to be honest with you. There were some really interesting games in that series.
Yeah. So we travel to ECU. That is going to be week 2. And then at 8 or 9, whatever we want to do it interchangeable, we got Tennessee. So explain to me, I'm just curious, why ECU over Tennessee? I feel like I know, but I just want to ask you, why do you have ECU over Tennessee currently right now?
Yeah, and certainly that's a question I got when we released this article a few weeks ago when I was talking about the schedule, because it is interesting. Yeah. A lot of it has to do where it falls in the season. I think that early season matchup, week 2, I mean, we're still really not going to know anything about South Carolina, man. That how much are we really going to learn against Eastern Illinois week 1? I mean, we're going to be able to do some nice things and build confidence and get a big win, we all presume, but I don't know that we're really going to learn anything about South Carolina. That game at ECU. And you know what? Maybe I'm hyping this one up in my own mind. I mean, I think that could be argued as the biggest game of the 2021 season for South Carolina, just because of, getting to a bowl game, getting to 6-6 or better. That is the expectation for the Gamecocks. That's the goal in Shane Beamer's first year. There are games you can lose on this schedule and still get to that 6-win plateau. Hey, you can lose to Kentucky. You can lose to Texas A&M. Heck, you could lose to Tennessee. But you can't lose to East Carolina and get to 6 wins. You just cannot do it. And when I look at the 2 programs right now, again, East Carolina, I just talked about Troy. ECU's another team that really, really benefited from COVID, man, in the sense of they've got basically their entire team back. They've got a game changer at quarterback. Now, their biggest question is defensively. They got a brand new defensive coordinator. They were damn near as bad as South Carolina on defense a year ago. So they're going to have to get things shored up on the defensive side. And you'd like to think the Gamecocks, especially running the football, will be able to have success against ECU. But on the road at Dowdy-Ficklin, a really, really tough environment. Their fans are crazy. I mean, it's going to be a game they've got circled as their Super Bowl. And when I look at the 2 schools, the game at Tennessee worries me also, Noah, just because that has been a house of horrors for South Carolina. I don't care how bad. Yeah, I don't care how bad UT is. Neyland Stadium has just been so tough for the Gamecocks. I mean, heck, even with all the success they've had against Tennessee in the last decade when Steve Spurrier took over and really just laid a whooping to Tennessee for his entire tenure in Columbia. I mean, the Gamecocks have still only won in Tennessee like 3 or 4 times in their entire history. But when I look at the Tennessee program, man, they've just got so many questions. They have no idea what's going on. A first-year head coach. So I don't know. I mean, I think at that point in the season, I'll feel pretty good about South Carolina as far as we're going to kind of know, okay, this is what we're good at. This is what we're not good at. These are our strengths. These are our weaknesses. Week 2 is just still going to be, for me, such a question mark in regards to this football team. Who can we depend on 3rd and 7, a big moment, man? Because I can tell you right now, as much as crazy as it may sound to you and others, I look at that ECU game and I'm like, that looks like a 1-score game to me, believe it or not. So maybe I'll be wrong. Again, maybe the Gamecocks will take care of business, but do not sleep on the East Carolina Pirates. And for me, it really was a coin flip. I mean, you could argue both, but I don't know, man. That Tennessee program's a disaster. I mean, would you disagree? Yeah. I mean, that Tennessee program is just in complete shambles, I feel, right now. So I honestly, right now, am more concerned about the ECU game than I am the Tennessee game, and I never thought I would ever say that. But again, a lot of it where it falls in the schedule, but East Carolina's a good football team this year, man. There's no question. If you don't think the Pirates are going to bring their A game and do everything in their power to take down the Gamecocks finally, because it's been a while since they've won one against us, you're mistaken. So, again, it's a coin flip. You could interchange those out at 8-9, 9-8, whatever. But, I went with East Carolina as being a slightly more difficult game than that road trip to Knoxville.
Yeah, I again, like, it was really tough for me. East Carolina, like this team hasn't traveled with Shane Beamer yet. This is going to be our first road test that Shane Beamer has ever done. And you're really not going to know anything after the Eastern Illinois game. So I think it's very intriguing. That Tennessee traveling to Neyland Stadium, it's such a tough
and I'll be at both. I'll be at both. So my first ever road trip to Knoxville, and of course my first ever road trip to ECU. So I'm really looking forward to it. But two very tricky games, and I think for different reasons. So should be fun.
I mean, 2013 Tennessee, when we traveled there, that was my first ever game I ever went to. Obviously not a good one because that screwed our SEC championships and the national championship hopes because we were going to win the Natty that year if that stupid, what was it, sideline catch by, I can't remember who it was.
Marquez North. Marquez North, the name that echoes in Gamecocks fans' minds at this point still.
And then freaking grade 4 Noah getting chirped out of all the Tennessee bars on the walk back to the car. But like, Tennessee, I think honestly, their program, yes, is in complete shambles. I think that they're going to be decent at the quarterback position this year, and I think that will help. I don't know who's going to be the quarterback. I'm guessing it's between Harrison Bailey and Hendon Hooker. Maybe even throw Joe Milton in there. I know he did terrible at Michigan last year, but those are 3 talented guys, and if you want to add in Brian Maurer, I don't think that he's going to come out as the starting QB for Tennessee the whole season. But the home field advantage for Tennessee and just our history in Tennessee really, really scares me. And the fact that they might have a comfortable quarterback, which might help the program as a whole when you have the guy who's an actual player who's leading the team who can do some stuff, I think that's going to help Tennessee. So that's why I had them the slight edge over ECU. Now, here's where it really gets interesting for us. 7, 6, 5. So 7, we have something different. 6, we both have Auburn. And then 5, we had the different one. So 7 and 5 are interchangeable for us. You have at Missouri being your 7. I have versus Kentucky being my 7. And then at 5, you have versus Kentucky. And then at 5, I have at Missouri. So which one do you want to talk about first? You pick.
I mean, here's the thing. I'll say this. It's splitting hairs with all these games, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking like 5 through 10. I mean, that's really a bunch, or 5 through 9. That's a bunch of games you could really jumble up and put them anywhere. But, you want to talk about that Kentucky game. I mean, dude, I think that is, a lot of people will argue, I talked about ECU a lot. Many will argue that's the most important game of Shane Beamer's first season. 100%. And again, is there really a must win in Shane Beamer's first year? Many will argue not necessarily, and I would agree to an extent because year one for me, the record is secondary, right? What you want to see as a Gamecock fan in regards to the culture being established and on the field, what we need to see from this team and the progression, the overall changes in year one. But the record is important, man. Let's not act like it's not. Getting to a bowl game and having that to sell on the recruiting trail and sell to prospects, because you can sell, hey, we're just a couple of pieces away, man. You, and you, boom, all of a sudden, we're competing. We're legitimately fighting for a shot to go to Atlanta. So winning games certainly is important. It helps everything. But that Kentucky game, I know Gamecock fans hate to do it, but you have to give Kentucky credit. You have to give Mark Stoops credit, man. They're a really good football team. And I'll tell you this, Noah, and this might be shocking to hear for you. And again, I have not dropped my predictions. I'll be doing so in 2 weeks. I'll literally give my game-by-game predictions for the 2021 season. But I'll be honest with you. There's no reason South Carolina should beat Kentucky. And I know that might sound crazy to hear, but when you look at it, if, God forbid, we were Kentucky fans, I mean, you think about it. We have a 9th-year head coach who's built his program. His culture is ingrained. He's already got his systems in place. He's got guys that are bought in. And I understand they have to come to Willie B, and I know we all hope, I tend to think, but we all hope that's going to be a night game for you at Williams-Brice. Gamecock fans, heck, we've gotten to the point where we absolutely loathe Kentucky because they've beaten us 6 out of the last 7 years. But no South Carolina fan will admit at this point right now, or probably ever will, that Kentucky's a better football program than South Carolina, nor should they. I'm not fighting that. But when you look at this game on paper and what Mark Stoops has built and the depth and everything else, there's really no reason the Gamecocks should win other than, again, being at home and hopefully by week 4, you've seen this team sort of develop. Luke Doty take that next step or at least begin to. The running game establish itself as a strength. And, oh, by the way, that defense with that defensive front be one of the best in the SEC as well. But, Mizzou is kind of – I don't really know what to think of Mizzou. I'll be totally honest with you, Noah. And Mizzou is in a really interesting spot. And I talked about them when I broke them down. It's just kind of what are they? Are they a middle-of-the-pack SEC team? Are they going to take that next step this year? Because, hey, the SEC East is wide open. I mean, it's Georgia. There's a huge gap. Yeah, it's Florida, and then there's another gap. But 3 through 7, I mean, does anybody really have any idea? So who's going to be that team that fits in that 3 and 4 spot? Is it going to be Missouri? Is it going to be Kentucky? Is it going to be South Carolina? God forbid, is it going to be Tennessee? I don't think it's going to be Vandy, but hey, you never know. But Mizzou is just one of those kind of up in the air. You know, I know they have a good quarterback. They've got problems on defense as well. Eli Drinkwitz in his, his second season in Como. And then the Auburn game at 6. I do think Auburn's going to be a quality football team. How good are they going to be? Not 100% sure. Of course, the Auburn breakdown for us dropped today on the podcast. But Bo Nix at quarterback, also TJ Finley, who somehow I had a complete omission on the show today. I don't know if you listened to it, but I had a complete omission of TJ Finley and forgot he had transferred there. I tend to still think it's probably going to be Bo Nix. But either way, they got a quarterback competition. They've got Tank Bigsby, who I know Gamecock fans sort of have a grudge against, not necessarily against him, but the fact that everybody loves town. Yeah, of course. And then, of course, by the way, Mike Bobo comes to town, who, if you didn't know, guys, and you're tuned in, is less than beloved by South Carolina faithful. All of my homies hate Mike Bobo, if you didn't know. But
that's the game I'm most excited for, 110%. Like, even more than Clemson. I know it sounds insane. I am so pumped up for that Auburn game.
Yeah, but that Kentucky game, man, I just think you really do have to give credit to, and I understand why you'd rank Mizzou ahead of that one, because that one is on the road, and Farrat Field is just a really strange venue and a really interesting place to play. And heck, that series with South Carolina Mizzou has been as crazy as any. But I just think Kentucky, actually, as a football team, as wild as it sounds, there's a chance they might go 8-4 this year. They might go 9-3 this year. I mean, you truly never know. But Mark Stoops, you got to give them credit. They did a really good job of building up that program. And again, that game being early on in the season for South Carolina and coming the week after the game in Athens against Georgia. You hope and pray you're at full strength. You're not dealing with any lingering issues from that Georgia game. But, I mean, really, like you mentioned, man, especially these 5 through 7, 4 through 7 in our list, you could really jumble those up in any order, and I wouldn't have much argument with you. But, yeah, I mean, listen, you talk about this 2021 season. I know I'm rambling right now. No, I apologize. But you talk about this 2021 season and what's going to make the difference and getting to 6-6 or better. You could argue these 3 games we have listed, 5 through 7, that's your season right there.
Yeah, that's the difference.
That's your season. Those 4 swing games, or those 3 swing games we have listed there, I would add, really, for you and your list, 5 through 8. 5 through 8, Missouri, Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee, those 4 games. How South Carolina does in those 4 will tell the entire story of this season. If they can go 2 or better in those 4 games, the Gamecocks are going bowling. They go worse, it's tough to say. So, those are all 4 very winnable swing games, but all present their own challenge. And again, that's why I put Kentucky at 5th. I do think you've got to put some respect on the Cats and what Stoops has built to this point.
Yeah, talking about Kentucky, I think Kentucky's a talented team. I'm always really, really harsh on Kentucky. I have no clue why. I just think it's because when I see the word Kentucky, it's like,
stigma of Kentucky. The stigma of Kentucky is still there. I mean, Kentucky could go win 10 games this year, but you still, when you think of, it's Kentucky, we should beat them.
It's basketball.
And that's still how Gamecock fans feel. And I mean, South Carolina's lost 6 or 7 to them. So, that will always be there. I don't know what could make that go away, but it's just Kentucky's Kentucky. They have the Vanderbilt stigma as well. Vanderbilt has that as well. Kentucky's just, you look at a game like that, it's a game you feel like you should win. And honestly, man, I'll tell you this, Noah, maybe not in year 1, but this was the biggest problem with the last staff. You cannot justify your program as on the up and up and on the right trajectory, and we're getting closer to being a true contender. You cannot justify those things and lose to the Kentucky Wildcats in football. You simply just can't do it. You
got to overtake them somehow. You got to beat them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So talking about Kentucky, kind of the reason why I have Missouri at 5 and Kentucky at 7. Just, you look at the last game that Kentucky played South Carolina in South Carolina the last time we won. Kentucky still had tons of talent on that team. Like, you look at the guys on that team, they still had Lynn Bowden. They still had Jamin Davis on the defense. They had all those guys. But you look at who was at quarterback position for them, Sawyer Smith. He didn't have a good game, and he wasn't really the guy for Kentucky. And you had to put, I think Lynn Bowden played Wildcat a bit in that game too. But you look at Kentucky guys this year, like we kind of talked about it with Luke Doty. If there's any list that does not have Luke Doty at 14, the number 14 spot is Kentucky QB, insert name here, between like Bo Allen, between Joey Gatewood, between Levis, all of those guys. Right. Do I feel confident enough that Kentucky's quarterback will be able to go into South Carolina and win that game when the guy isn't proven yet in the season. That's where I don't know. That's where I look at Mizzou. First of all, traveling to Missouri is going to be tough on its own. The Kentucky game we get from the comfort of Willie B. But traveling to Como, the other Columbia, obviously. Missouri, I really like that offense this year. Again, like the defense is a struggle and everything, but Connor Baselick, man, that kid's made some major improvements. He's already being talked about as a top half quarterback in the SEC, like 7 and above, everything like that. You look at the guys that you got on the outside. You got Chisholm, you got Knox, and then in the running back position, you got Batty. And then also at the wide receiver position, they just picked up Mookie Cooper from, where is it? OSU, Ohio State, too. So I think that Missouri offense is going to be really, really good. And for a defense for us traveling with our secondary, I kind of feel weary about that game. You look at Kentucky. Kentucky's strength is going to be that rushing game this year because they bring back one of the best offensive lines in all the SEC. Chris Rodriguez is going to lead one. He's one of the better running backs in all the SEC. You even look at wide. I think you got some talented guys. They bring in the guy from Nebraska, Wandell Robinson, and then you also got Josh Ali still out there. It's just, who is that quarterback? Who's going to get the ball in those guys' hands? And you look at how this matches up. If Kentucky's strength is their rushing game, well, our strength is our defensive line and everything like that. And I mean, Missouri will beat our secondary if they're going to win that game. It's going to be because they're able to throw the ball. Will Kentucky be able to throw that ball? Is just a question mark for me right now. So that's why
will be a huge opportunity for South Carolina's defensive line because, like you mentioned, that is going to be the matchup of that football game is that Gamecocks defensive line slowing down that Kentucky running game and also getting in the face of whoever's playing quarterback. No question. I agree.
Yeah, 100%. And then talking about Auburn really quick, I actually like how we match up in this game really nicely because Auburn, their strength is the rushing game. Again, like their wide receivers, you're still finding out who's the guy behind there, or who's going to be your main guy that's out there in Auburn. But you look at the rushing game, Tank Bigsby, Sean Shivers are going to be the two big guys. Again, our strength is our D-line, so you got a good matchup there. And then offensively, Auburn's strength is their secondary. They're one of the best secondaries in all of college football this season, but their D-line is one of the weaker spots on this Auburn team. So I like our rushing game against Auburn there. So that's why I have them at 6. Again, I said that's the game that I'm probably most hyped for. So let's move on to number 4-1. Let's talk about 4 first because we have the same team. We have Florida down here. Talk about Florida. They travel to Willie B. I can't remember what week that's in, but it's somewhere towards the middle of the season. Florida is a team that has still tons of question marks on what to be told this season because you look at what they did last year and everything. Obviously, you have Trask leave, you have Pitts leave, you have Kadarius Toney leave. You have all these guys leave, also a couple on the defense, but I still think you have some talent on Florida. It's all going to depend on how does Emory Jones do. I think that he is a talented guy. He has the ability to have a really successful season with Florida, not only throwing the ball, but running it as well. You look at the rushing game for them. They bring in DeMarcus Bowman, transfer from Clemson. It looks like this rushing game will be better than a lot of people expect them to be. You look at the receiving game. It's still, you got Jacob Copeland there still. You got Zippier. You got Gamble at the tight end position. I still think that there's tons of talent all over this Florida team, especially looking at the defensive line. I look at them too. And a bunch of the linebackers. You got like Brenton Cox. You got Zachary Carter, tons of talent on this Florida team. Them coming to Willie B, though, I don't know what it is. I'm not feeling that South Carolina's going to be favored in this game, and I don't feel like they're going to win, but I feel like the Gamecocks have a good chance. And if any upset's going to happen for the Gamecocks this season, I think it will be Florida coming to Willie B.
Yeah, Florida's a really interesting team this year, Noah, because they just lost so much from a year ago. And as we saw with LSU, the year after they won the national title, and we've seen at South Carolina, we've seen it all over college football, right? When you lose generational type talent, like a guy like Kyle Trask was and Kyle Pitts and some of the others they lost, how can you not feel the impact of that? Which I think they will. But of course, Florida's still Florida. They didn't stop recruiting, right? Many are high on Emory Jones and the playmakers they have coming back and what they have defensively. And I know they struggle on the defensive side of the ball, but they cleaned house in regards to all of their defensive assistants, if you will. Of course, Todd Grantham's still there as the DC, but Florida's still Florida. Like you mentioned, they've got talent all over the field. What makes this game so intriguing, and again, we both got it ranked 4th. I've got it ranked 4th. I think it's a tough game because, like you said, the Gators are still the Gators. They've got talent. They 1 through 22, they're better than you. There's no question. They're more talented than you. There's no question. But this game this year, this is certainly the one. This is going to be that sexy pick that when people look at the Gamecock schedule, they say, okay, if there's an opportunity for a big-time upset in Shane Beamer's first season, it is this game. And I'll tell you why, Noah. Where it falls on the schedule. The week before this game, Florida has to play their annual rivalry matchup against the Georgia Bulldogs. Mind you, they'll have already played Alabama at this point in the season, but they'll be coming off of that really emotional, physical game against Georgia, as we all know it to be. On the contrary, the Gamecocks will be coming off a bye week. So you factor that in. You factor the games at home. You factor the way that South Carolina's played Florida the last couple of years. I mean, there's been, we all remember, God forbid, the 2019 game that we won't even talk about the SEC referees.
RJ
last
Roderick
year
on the fourth down. Changed the whole game. If we knock that ball down, I think the Gamecocks come out of Willoughby with the
win. And then last year,
and Florida back to back.
And then last year, even with as porous as that South Carolina team was, I mean, you really could argue took Florida the wire, and if it weren't for some baffling coaching decisions down the stretch where the time clock management, whatever, that could have been an even closer game. And maybe the Gamecocks have a chance to tie that game, or God forbid, maybe even win that game. So South Carolina's done
touchdown in the last couple of minutes too. Like,
just it was Shy. It was Shy Smith. Hill missed Shy Smith wide open. That's what it was. But it was like 8 minutes left in the game, and you took 7.5 minutes on. I mean, just the most absurd thing ever. Either way, you've played Florida really tough, and again, just where that game falls on this schedule. Again, you coming off the bye, Florida coming off the Georgia game. It'll be later in the season, so you'd like to think again. South Carolina is a team, and I talked about this with Perry Orth. One of the things he wants to see, and certainly you and I both want to see, we want to see this team progress and get better week to week to week. This should be a better football team in week 10, which is where this game falls, than it is in week 1. And if that's the case and they're progressing and getting better and Luke Doty's making those strides and the running game's only getting stronger and defensively, hey, maybe by this point in the season, the secondary started to figure some things out and find some answers. So if you can do that, come off the bye, Florida comes off the Georgia game. Also, Florida, if I remember correctly, I don't have their schedule pulled up. They've got a really big game the following week as well. So it falls in a really interesting spot on the schedule for them. It's one of those games, kind of how I talked about Auburn last year, where it sort of just felt like, you know what? The stars sort of aligned. Like everything makes sense going into this week. And again, these two teams, we'll know a lot more about them as we get into that matchup, but it does set up well for South Carolina at home because you'll be looking for that statement win in year 1 of Shane Beamer. Again, record secondary. It's all about laying the foundation and making sure this team's playing the game the right way and they're all fired up. But hey, winning solves a lot of problems. And if you can get that statement win, like against an Auburn or against a Florida, where when you're in recruiting and to your fan base, you have that to hang your hat on, that is going to pay off major dividends for Shane Beamer. And I think that Florida game could be the game. Remember, maybe South Carolina, maybe you catch Florida off that rivalry game, you catch them napping a bit, whatever it may be, and you're able to pull that big upset. So certainly it sets up well. I don't think anybody in the preseason necessarily is going to be picking the Gamecocks to win, but I think if you have to circle one game where you say that right there, that's the one, if they're going to get the big upset, there it is. I think you look at that Florida game as your top candidate.
Yeah, and you look at the Florida games the last bunch of years and everything, there hasn't been a game in some time that you just come out of it and be like, that hurt to watch in terms of just it being like a complete blowout. Like South Carolina has hung around with Florida, even going like you go back 2017, we won. I remember I was at that game.
2018. 2018, you were up 17 points and you just fell apart. The last 3 seasons, you could realistically argue the Gamecocks had you were leading going in the fourth quarter in 2019, and then the refs happened. So, there's been many chances, and maybe this is the year the Gamecocks finally break through and get one back from the Gators.
Yeah, and that kind of transitions nicely into what we're going to talk about now, because talking about how there hasn't been a Florida game that has really killed us to watch in terms of it being a blowout, we have two teams that have certainly done that to us. Talking about, we have this interchangeably, 3 Texas A&M for you, 2 versus Clemson, and then I had 3 Clemson, 2 Texas A&M. I just want to state, I'll talk about Clemson first and Texas A&M. I do not think that Texas A&M is a better team than Clemson. Just putting that out there. I still think Clemson's a better team than Texas A&M. Clemson has an amazing defensive line, the best in the country. Clemson, DJ Uiagalelei is still going to have a great season. And I know I hate saying this because I'm a Gamecocks fan. I hate Clemson. But why I do have Texas A&M above them, you look at the talent, take away the quarterback position, because I think Clemson, I think DJ trumps Haynes King in this case. But you look at the units compared side to side for Texas A&M and Clemson, I take Texas A&M's running back position. You look at Aniyah Smith, you look at Etienne, you look at Isaiah Spiller, obviously. You look at the wide receiver position and the tight end position. I take Texas A&M with Lane, with D-Mass, with like Weidermeyer. You look at the offensive line is a struggle for Texas A&M, so I take Clemson's. But even defensively, like Texas A&M has tons of talent. You look at the guys like DeMarvin Leal on the defensive line. Add that with traveling to College Station, which I'm pretty sure I think College Station might be a bit closer than Missouri. I was about to say this will be the furthest the Gamecocks travel, but I think geographically, I think Columbia, Missouri is a bit closer. The Gamecocks have never played well against Texas A&M. We're 0-6, 0-7 against them.
7 straight losses. Yep.
Never won a single game against them. And the last time we went to Texas A&M was one of the most painful games we've had to watch. And then the game last season against Texas A&M was the most painful game we've had to watch. So just our history against Texas A&M and having to travel there, I feel like that's tougher than going up against a Clemson team who, yes, I think they're better than Texas A&M. I think Clemson's one of the top teams in the country still, but you have a rivalry game. You're at home in front of your home fans and everything. The players know how much this game means to them. So you're kind of coming into that game with more juice and more oomph in that sense than going up against Texas A&M, which you historically have not played well against at all. So that is my reason for having Texas A&M at 2 and Clemson at number 3. That's probably the shock of this whole list, having those two teams interchanged, because I still think Clemson's the better team, but that is why I have those there. So you talk on Texas A&M and Clemson and just your thoughts on those two teams.
Yeah, and I saw your list, and I was a little surprised, but I wasn't totally shocked, because fans should understand this too. These rankings, it's the toughest games of the season. It's not the most talented teams you play. Yeah. Right, because, I mean, I'm not sitting there saying that East Carolina is necessarily a better team than Tennessee, but as how the game, hey, there are things that factor into each game, like I've mentioned many times, where it falls on the schedule, what time of the year you play them. You know, a lot of those things factor into the toughness of these games. But again, we're splitting hairs here, but I still look at it. Clemson is Clemson. What they've done in recruiting, the type of talent they have this year, returning 10 of 11 on defense. And like you mentioned, unfortunately, probably Uyunglele is going to be an incredible player. They get Justin Ross back. They do what they do in the running game. And I know they've got to replace a lot, but Clemson's going to reload. And of course, they'll be well rested at that point in the year, because they basically play 10 spring games before they play South Carolina. So their players will probably play about half of the football that ours have played by the final week of the season. But I mean, that Texas A&M game, it's unfortunate, man, because, when we first added them to schedule in 2014, I thought to myself, wow, what a great cross-divisional game. And I was there in 2014 for the debut of SEC Network, and the first time we played them, and it was just an absolute drubbing. And, we've just really never had any success against them. There were a couple of scares here and there, especially when Shane Beamer first got on campus. And I remember specifically, I think 2017 at their place, we came close. But unfortunately, A&M right now, man, is one of those games. I have some fans argue with me, oh, that's a toss-up. I'm like, until South Carolina beats Texas A&M, I'm listing is it a law. It's an automatic L for me, unfortunately, when I look at the schedule. And that's kind of where Clemson is also. So, again, we're splitting hairs there. I think Clemson, I just simply gave them a nod just because the overall talent. I look at it this way, Noah. When I look at the schedule, could I possibly see South Carolina pulling the shocker at Texas A&M? Believe it or not, I could see it. Could I see the Gamecocks pulling the shocker over Clemson? As much as I hate to say it, more than likely,
probably not this season.
Probably not this season. So, again, like you said, you're splitting hairs with that one. I definitely understand why you put A&M 2, just because, again, they've just been – I mean, we've literally never in our entire history beat them. So, I'm not even sure any of us are convinced that it's even possible at this point. So, I do get that, but I just put Clemson at 2 just because they're one of the two most talented teams you'll play this season. And, of course, we're about to talk about the most talented, I believe, at least at number 1.
Yeah, me too.
But, 2 and 3 both are two really, really, really tough football games for Shane Beamer in year 1 of his tenure.
Yeah, 100%. And then we both have the same number 1 at Georgia. I still stand strong and say that this is the toughest team that we play all season, not just the toughest game that we'll have to play in terms of where it falls on the schedule and we have to travel to Athens and everything like that. But Georgia, man, the way that this team is shaping up this year, you look at the quarterback position. Obviously, JT Daniels is looking like a Heisman favorite. He's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in all of college football. You look at the running back room, you got Zamir White, you got James Cook, you got all these guys back there. The wide receiver position, yes, they do lose Pickens, but they still got a ton of guys out there. You go out in the transfer portal, you just grab 2 huge guys, Eric Gilbert from LSU, and you grab Darian Kendrick from Clemson, which is going to make that first week game a lot more interesting. Georgia's going to have one of the best defenses in the country, especially looking at their defensive line. They're a top 2 defensive line easily. The secondary is going to be good. The linebackers are going to be good. Everything about Georgia this season is shaping up really well. And the fact that even though the Gamecocks did go between the hedges and take it home last time, this year, it didn't seem possible that year in 2019, but this year, it's really, really tough to think of a scenario where the Gamecocks beat Georgia.
Yeah, and I don't think Georgia's forgotten about that either when we ripped up the hedges and went in there and took the W. No, listen, Georgia's a legitimate playoff team. There's no question. Like you just mentioned, all the talented players they have. And maybe they finally found the quarterback under Kirby Smart with JT Daniels and the transfers they got in the portal. I mean, you know, I think Georgia is a big-time, legitimate playoff national champion contender this year. And just simply put, man, I think asking Shane Beamer and his football team to go into Athens, third game of the season, and at night too, and pull out a victory is just it's asking way too much. I mean, I think, listen, this is going to be one of those. This is going to be a moment in the 2021 season that I'm really, really intrigued to see how this team responds. Because
this is
right
testing
now,
your culture. Because this is going to be a culture shock for them. Yeah.
Right, because
like you're going into Georgia night game, whatever.
Yes.
Most likely, if we're being all honesty, like take our fandom away, obviously we ride or die this team forever. But Georgia has the ability to run the brakes off of South Carolina in this game. Yeah. And if that does happen, this is where you're going to get that big culture test of how does this team respond? You just get run out of town on the road, but yet you have to come back to Columbia, South Carolina, and you still got a big game against Kentucky next week.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, again, like I said, it's one of those things where right now, you know, you're in the honeymoon phase. Everything's great. The positivity, the positive momentum, which is awesome. It's what this fan base, this program, this team absolutely needed. But, hey, you play an SEC schedule, and when you got Georgia week 3, guess what? You're probably going to get punched in the mouth, like you mentioned. Yeah. It's like Mike Tyson said. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And then what? So, yeah, like you said, man, I'm really excited to see how this team responds to adversity, how this team responds to probably getting knocked down, kicked, dragged, everything else. And, hey, I'm not sitting here trying to say that the Gamecocks couldn't make this a competitive game and couldn't give Georgia at least make it a second half game, if you will. But realistically, the Gamecocks don't match up well in this one. The Dogs are just, I mean, it's a juggernaut over there right now. I mean, they're maybe this, you know, maybe the second, you know, maybe the best team in the country. Heck, I don't know. It's them, Bama, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma, probably, as it's been the last couple of years. But yeah, I just think early on in the season, man, it's going to be really, really tough to go on the road at night and take down the Dogs. I think this is a game, and unfortunately, I hate to say this, if you can lose this game by 17 or less, that's a huge victory. I mean, that's a huge, huge victory for South Gun. And again, it's just because of where you are with the roster and a first-year head coach and everything else. I feel like I don't have to explain that, but this one does not set up favorably for South Carolina, and I'll just put it that way. But again, it'll be a great opportunity for the Gamecocks to run into adversity and respond the right way, because like we mentioned, that the Kentucky game, that home date is the following week. So you cannot let Georgia beat you twice, and I don't think Shane Beamer will allow that to happen. But yeah, that road date in Athens, man, that's Georgia's for real. I mean, that's it's really not even a knock on South Carolina. Georgia's just they're for real this year. They're not just playing to win the SEC East or what have you. They're playing to win it all, and I don't think they'll let the Gamecocks derail their national title dreams in week 3.
Yeah, 100%. Like, if we're talking realistically, just like there's not going to be any first-year head coaching team that does not have that kind of game where everything goes bad and everything like that. Like, you look, Texas is not going to go 12-0 this year with Sark. Auburn is not going to go 12-0 this year. Tennessee's not going to go 12-0 this year. Vanderbilt's certainly not going to go 12-0. All these teams that have first-year head coaches are going to run into that tough spot eventually in this season, no matter where it is. Like, let's say Texas goes out and loses to Arkansas week 2 when they travel there. It's how your team responds for that. It's how the growth happens, because none of these teams should be expecting a national championship this year. What you are expecting and what you are looking for is how is the culture changed, and how can you get your team to rebound from these losses, because they're going to happen before you win a national championship. This stuff has to happen. You have to learn to lose before you learn how to win, because you got to learn how to bounce back from losses and everything like that. No one walks into college football first year head coach and goes perfect. It just doesn't happen. So you got to learn how to respond to those losses and everything. And if the Gamecocks do, like, again, this will be a perfect test because you've got a big game against Kentucky the week after. If the Gamecocks can make it competitive against Georgia, I'll be happy if that team goes in, let's say, a 7-17 score at halftime or something like that. Or you look at like 24 to 14, something like that. If we stay within that 10 range at halftime or something like that and make it kind of competitive, be like, oh, if we get a turnover here or something like that, we could make this into a real good ball game. But if we're able to go out, put up really good stuff against Georgia, and then go out and come out just as good against Kentucky in terms of this is just as big of a game and everything like that, and we come out with the same firepower, I think all the fans will be really, really happy about the spot that Gamecock football is in.
And with that being said, no, I mean, the biggest thing is this, and what the previous staff and regime struggle with. Just in a game like this, you just can't get embarrassed. Show up and play the game the right way. I mean, that's listen, nobody's going to be picking you to win. You're probably going to be similar to 2019. You're probably going to be a 21, 24, 24.5 point underdog. I mean, nobody's going to be expecting anything crazy out of you. But if you can, if nothing else, make this a second half football game. But like you said, and something I've mentioned on my airways before, man, I'm just really excited because every team runs into adversity. Even teams that win national championships, they hit adversity at some point in a season, but it's all about how do you respond. And again, like you said, we're going to begin to see that culture that Shane Beamer is instilling because, hey, the culture right now, like I said, honeymoon phase, everything's great, but culture's built between the white lines to some degree. It's built on the field. It's built in moments of growth. And if nothing else, that Georgia game, it does give you the opportunity for a growing moment, a learning moment, a teaching moment for that coaching staff and that football team. And again, especially like I mentioned earlier, going into that matchup the next week against Kentucky. But, certainly the toughest game. Georgia's for real. They're legit, like I mentioned earlier, between the hedges. Should be a fun one. But you never know. South Carolina, Georgia, weirder things have happened, I guess. But, how this team responds, like you mentioned, man, that's what I'm most excited to see, not just from this game, but really this entire 2021 season for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you could come out of this season realistically 0-12, and if you see competitive games against each and every single team, I know it's an exaggeration going 0-12 against like Eastern Illinois and Troy and everything like that. You wouldn't be happy that you lost those games.
Yeah.
But if you see improvement within your program, that's a win for you. That's improvement.
Right. Well, my buddy posed I was going to say, my buddy, to your point, my buddy posed the hypothetical of, would you rather in Shane Beamer's first season go 5-7, but 6 of the 7 losses are by a touchdown or less? Or would you rather go 6-6, but you just get blown out in like 5 of the 6 games? I'm like, I'd rather go 5-7. And again, I know it's a hypothetical, 100%. But we want to see progress. That is the biggest thing, because the last staff's problem wasn't that they couldn't get a big-time upset win. They couldn't get an impressive win. We saw it 2019 in Athens. We saw it last year against Auburn. It was in the other games where you're getting blown out. You're getting embarrassed. You look like you don't even belong on the field. You need to see progress. If you're going to try to sell, especially in these early first couple of years when Shane Beamer is going to be building his program, recruiting, getting his players into his program and building and establishing that culture, you got to at least be able, though, to hold your own, make games competitive, have something that you can sell your fan base, your boosters, recruits on the recruiting trail. You can't sell a 48-3 loss to Texas A&M, right? There's a reason the old staff isn't here anymore. So I think that'll be the big thing. And again, like you said, in a game like Georgia, it does give you that opportunity where if you can play them a little bit tighter than people expect, all of a sudden you say, hey, look at South Carolina. Look what Shane Beamer's doing early, even if you don't win. So progress. Progress is what people want to see, even in year one, week-to-week progress, and then season-to-season progress as his tenure unfolds in Columbia. So.
Yeah, 100%. Losing a game to Georgia by 7 will get you a lot more respect than making the Duke's Mayo Bowl or something like that. Like,
exactly.
In all honesty. So the Gamecocks got a tough schedule like we always do. Again, top 5 hardest in the nation, but we will see how Shane Beamer and his squad do this season. So that is going to be the North to South show for today, guys. First of all, Chris, thank you very much for showing up. This was amazing. We went a bit over time by like a half an hour, but it was fun. It's good to talk Gamecock football. Can never get enough of it, but appreciate you coming on. Might have to do it again. Might got to jump on the Spurs Up show. Who knows? But really, really appreciate you. I think that this was one of the coolest, if not the coolest episodes that we've ever done. Got a lot of good talking in, got a lot of good segments in. So I appreciate you coming out. And guys, if you haven't, which you definitely should, go check out the Spurs Up Show. Again, click the link in the description. I tagged him there and I tagged him in the title. Just click on that little blue button or whatever. Take you right to his page, subscribe, go to the Instagram, follow, podcast, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. So Chris, any closing remarks before we wrap this up?
68 days, and I'm excited. And it's gonna fly by. So if you tuned in, you're obviously we're all counting in football, but enjoy these days of summer, man, because before you know it, July 19th, that's these media days, fall camp, first week of August, and from there, we're full steam ahead. But no, seriously, man, thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure. Talk college football and of course talk Gamecocks and have the opportunity to chat. And obviously, I know you'll continue to do great work, and we'll continue to work together, great work together as well. We'd love to get you on the airwaves and return the favor and everything else. Like I said, I appreciate the opportunity. And we'll have to do it again soon. Like I said, there's a lot to get into. It's talking season, and I know we all can't wait for kickoff. And it's gonna be this fall is going to be incredible for many different reasons. You're going to be here on campus, and Beamer's first season, and the electricity around Columbia, South Carolina is going to be like unlike anything we've seen in quite a long time at the Gamecocks. So I'm looking forward to it. And again, looking forward to chatting with you guys. I appreciate you.
Yeah, of course. Again, it will be no time at all until foot hits leather, and then the Gamecocks and college football will be underway. So I'll wrap that up right there, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, go check out the Spurs Up Show. We will be back live Wednesday again from 7 to 8. That's all for today, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment. Thank you for watching, and definitely come back for next show.